If you have your Bibles this morning, if you'll grab them, go to 2 Corinthians 9 one last time for a while. Today we're going to finish the series that we started several weeks ago. As the kids are filing out to go to Kids Club, let me give us just kind of a recap of where we've been in this series on the generous life. We started the very, very first week by laying the right foundation and providing the right motivation for our giving, the reason for us to give and to give generously. And we said generosity is not based on how much we have or don't have. It's not based on how much we give or don't give. Ultimately, it's based on who we are as a person, and that is based on who we belong to. So we said the foundation for our giving is God's giving. We give because He gives. We get to be and we are generous because He was generous and is generous first and foremost. That's the life that God has brought us into. It's not something we level up and achieve. It's something God has already provided and brought us into, and now we then go live in the overflow of who God is and what He's done for us. That's our foundation. That's our reason for giving. It's God. And then secondly, the second week, we talked about the requirements for giving and giving generously. And we said giving must be, and it must be intentional. And most importantly, as Paul says, it must be cheerful. And so we talked about some ways that we can do that we can cultivate that kind of joy and that cheerfulness in giving by asking ourselves some hard questions, by reminding ourselves of what we have ultimately by drawing near to God in worship. And then last week, we talked about the resources that we have for giving generously. God has not left us on our own to figure things out and to save up and to work really hard to make sure these things happen the way that we want them to. We said God Himself provides, and He keeps providing, and He never stops providing. God gives us everything that we need so that we can be generous. And that leads us to this morning. This morning, we're going to talk about the results. All that in place, where is this going? What happens when we live this way, when we give this way? See, a lot of times when we give, we might know on the front end where it's going, where we hope it's going, like we're giving to our church, or we're giving to support a certain ministry, or we're giving to help someone in a particular situation. And we see that, but beyond that, we often don't know how it plays out, or what kind of impact that it's going to make. And for most of it, we're not ever going to know on this side of eternity. But Paul, in our passage, says there are at least 4 things that we can know, that we can see as we live and give generously. We can know that these things are going to happen. And that's what we're going to look at this morning. So if you will, take your Bibles and follow along as I read for us. One last time, 2 Corinthians 9, verses 6 through 15. Paul says, the point is this: whoever sows sparingly will also reap sparingly, and whoever sows bountifully will reap bountifully. So each one must give as he has decided in his heart, not reluctantly, not under compulsion, for God loves a cheerful giver. And God is able to make all grace abound to you, so that having all sufficiency in all things at all times, you may then abound in every good work. As it is written, He has distributed freely, He has given to the poor, His righteousness endures forever. Now He who supplies seed to the sower and bread for food will also supply and multiply your seed for sowing and increase the harvest of your righteousness. You will be enriched in every way, to be generous in every way, which through us will produce thanksgiving to God. For the ministry of this service is not only supplying the needs of the saints, but is also overflowing in many thanksgivings to God. By their approval of this service, they will glorify God because of your submission, flowing from your confession of the gospel of Christ and the generosity of your contribution for them and for all others, while they long for you and they pray for you because of the surpassing grace of God that is upon you. Verse 15, thanks be to God for His inexpressible gift. All right, this passage, as we've worked through over the last couple of weeks, covers a lot of ground, but as we've been saying, it's not setting out to cover everything there is to know about giving and giving generously. And for our focus this morning, the results of giving, Paul's not out to list, comprehensively everything that happens when we give this way, but if you picked up on it, there are several things that he notes that we can be sure of as we give this way. And I want to highlight 4 of them for us this morning. So if you're taking notes, I encourage you to write this down. Here's the first one. Generous giving meets needs. Generous giving meets needs. This is verse 12. In the original context of Paul writing to the Christians in Corinth, if you remember, there were other Christians who were back in Jerusalem who were really struggling to get by. That's the context. So Paul, not just with those in Corinth, but all the other churches that he had been to and ministered to, he had arranged a widespread giving campaign to help raise funds to send back to those Christians who were struggling to take care of them. So we'll talk more about this here in just a moment. There's deeper level meaning at play, but the most obvious and the most direct result of their giving is very practical and straightforward. It helped meet the basic needs of those who were struggling. So we don't have to overthink it. If there were people, and there were, who couldn't afford to buy food, now they could. If there were people who couldn't afford, to have enough clothing that they needed for them or their family, now they could. If they had medical issues that they couldn't afford to get taken care of, if they had home issues with a hole in the roof, I don't know. Things happen, things come up, needs arise. These people who were struggling now had the resources because God's people had come together to help meet their needs. And I want to add a quick side note here. I don't want to get off in the weeds too much with this, but I do want to point out a quick and important distinction for us to keep in mind. When we do this, as we seek to give generously to meet the needs of others as we see them, while it is good and important for us to be wise in how we do that and thoughtful in how we give, and we'll have that discussion some other day, we need to also realize that that doesn't mean that we get to judge and determine who deserves what. Do you know what I mean by that? See, it is not our job to determine if someone is in need enough, or if they're in need in the right way, or if they deserve our help. In other words, they don't have to prove it or earn it. It's not a competition, and it's not an audition for us. We're not the judges of that need. If they are in need, and we see it, and we're aware of it, our job is to seek to provide to meet their needs. This isn't my word. This is from 1 John chapter 3. He says, if anyone has material possessions, if you have worldly goods, if you have the resources, and you see a brother or sister in need, and yet you close your heart to them, how does God's love abide in you? Instead, 1 John 3, this is verse 18. Instead, let us not love in word or in talk, but in what? But in deed and in truth. So that's the first good and important result of generous giving. It simply sees the need, and it seeks to meet the need of others, especially those who are Christian brothers and sisters. But as I said just a moment ago, there's so much more to it than that. See, when we live and when we give generously as the Lord leads us, it's not just about meeting those obvious practical needs. It can also communicate. It sends a message. So this is the second point, the second result. Giving generously confirms our testimony. Confirms our testimony. Look again at verse 13. It says, by their approval of this service, the work of this collection of giving generously, they, meaning those who are on the receiving end, they will glorify God because of your submission or because of your obedience that comes from what? From your confession of the gospel of Christ. In other words, you don't have to give generously to prove that you're a Christian, but it sure does provide some meaningful evidence, doesn't it? When we give generously, it indicates and it expresses and it displays, it puts the truth of the gospel on full display in our lives for others to see. So when we give generously as the Lord leads us to, it's not just about us being nice. There are a lot of nice people in this world. And it's not just about us being charitable. There are a lot of charitable people in this world too. When we give generously as the Lord leads us, what it's doing is showing Christ. We are being Christ-like. You know another good word for what Paul is describing here? Well, actually, let me give you two. Authentic, genuine. That's what Paul says earlier in chapter 8 in this same letter when he says that giving generously needs to come from a place of genuine love. I want you to think about something without raising your hands. How many of us know someone who loves to talk all about Christianity, their faith, the Bible, church, kind of religious things? They love to talk about it. They're really good at talking about it. And yet for all their talk, if you look at their life, there's not a lot of evidence that that's real. You don't have to raise your hands. Maybe it's us. Maybe we know someone like this. Paul is pointing us in the opposite direction. Paul says, if you're living the generous life, that is evidence that what you have and what you know and what you claim to believe about God is real. It's not shallow. It's not fake. It's not for show. It's not performative. It's not just an idea. It's something that has changed your life. I mean, it is one thing for us to say that Jesus is Lord, and he is, so that's appropriate and it's true. But it's another thing entirely for us to go out and live like he's the Lord. Do you know what I'm talking about? It's one thing for us to tell someone, look, I know you're struggling, but you can trust God. He's generous. That's true, and we can say that, but it's another thing entirely for us to then to say, look, I trust that God is generous, and I'm going to show you. Do we see the difference? As James chapter 2 says in my own paraphrase, if you see someone who is poor and lacking in basic needs, and you just say to them, hey, I'm praying for you, take care, be blessed, but then do nothing to meet those needs, what good is that? James continues and says, faith that isn't accompanied by action is what? It's dead. He said it's empty. It's worthless. Or as Eugene Peterson puts it, God talk without accompanying God action is outrageous nonsense. We're just wasting everybody's time if we're going to talk the talk but not walk the walk. But when we give generously the way that Paul has been talking about, it makes it clear not only that we're serious about our faith, but that our faith is real. It makes it clear it's not just something that we talk about, it's something that has happened to us. That we are different now, that we're doing things that we didn't think of on our own, from resources that we didn't come up with on our own. It indicates that we've been made new, that we've been brought into a whole new way of being and living. We've been brought into a generous life, and we can't help now but to go and to show it. So when we live the generous life, it communicates what we truly believe to others. It confirms our testimony. That's the second thing. Here's the third result. Generous giving strengthens relationships. This is verse 14. It strengthens relationships. Now, this is yet another way that the giving generously goes deeper than just meeting surface level needs. Let me give you an example from my own life of being on the receiving end of this. A slightly different situation, but the same core principle is at work here. Several years ago, and some of you know this story, my wife Deanna and I were going through just a really awful season of life. We've all been there, right? And this particular season was just filled with anxiety and fear and frustration because in that season we were dealing with child loss, with miscarriage, actually several in a row. And so we're pretty private people, and so we hadn't told a lot of people about it, but we had told some close friends and family so they could be praying about it. And then the day came when we got the call, we got the confirmation that our worst fears were true, that we had lost the child again, and we were crushed. Again, you never get better at going through something like that, even if you've been through it more than once. And so we were devastated and just kind of reeling and didn't quite know what to do. And a friend of ours reached out to us to check on us, which was good. That was encouraging. But it's what she did next that made all the difference, and it's what I remember most about that really terrible day. See, she didn't just call or text us or send a card or send cookies. Others had done that, and that was wonderful and meaningful. But what she did is she went the next step, and she dropped everything that she was doing. She lives over 3 hours away, and she traveled to where we are so she could just sit with us in our living room in our pain. That's generosity. She didn't have to do that. She could have called. She could have texted. There's so many other things that she could do, but she chose to go above and beyond, not to try to fix anything because there's nothing for her to fix, but just to be with us, to give us the gift of her presence so that we would know we weren't alone in what we were going through. It strengthened our relationship. Do you see what I'm talking about? It made all the difference for us that day. And we remember all these years later that moment and that friend and how she gave us her presence when we need it most. So Paul's talking about here, even though the situation that he's talking about is a little different. Look again at verse 14. Paul says that the people on the receiving end of the Corinthians' generosity will what? Will long for you and will pray for you. Or as the NIV says, in their prayers, their hearts will go out to you. So what that's saying is it's not about the gift itself. Again, the gift is nice and it meets needs and it provided a great blessing, but the gift was also filled with so much more. The gift was filled with the power of God to do work on a deeper and a wider and a more lasting level. The work that God was doing through that generosity was going to last far beyond the situation or the need itself. See, by God's design, giving generously isn't about charity, it's about connection. Do we see this? It's about connection. It's about knowing and being reminded that you're not all alone in this world, in this life, that God knows and that he sees and that he cares, and he has people who know and see and care too, and they can come around you to support you and to encourage you. So much of life can be frustrating. So much of life can be deflating. So much of our time can be struggling in what feels like isolation. No one else sees me. No one else knows what I'm going through. No one else is there. We can have these thoughts in our hearts and our minds, and I know you know what I'm talking about. But when someone who knows Jesus Christ, when someone has that burning love that Christ has put within their souls, reaches out towards you in an act of generosity, whatever form that it takes, that can make such a difference. Think about this too. Think about how generous giving preaches the gospel. Think about people, this is Paul's circumstance, but think about our own lives today. People who have no business being together in the eyes of the world, caring for each other. People who are coming from radically different backgrounds. People who everywhere else in the world are at odds and are fighting and don't like each other because they're not like each other. And yet somehow these same people who have no business being together, who have no similarities, are coming together. And they're loving each other, and they're serving each other, and they're going above and beyond to make sure someone else's needs are met. Why? What could possibly overpower these walls that we've erected in our lives to keep us separated from each other? It's Jesus. That's what Paul is saying. So when we act generously, when we reach out to others and we seek to bless them as God is blessing us, what does that communicate? What does that show? Who we belong to and what he's doing in our world and how he is bringing people together. Very simply, the more tight-fisted we are with our resources, whether that's our time or our money or our energy, whatever it is, the more we are tight-fisted with our stuff, the more it shrinks us down with it. But the more that we are open with our things, the more it opens us up to God, who he is and what he's doing, but then also opens us up to each other, to love and to serve and to bless each other in a two-way street. Generous giving strengthens our relationships. Here's the last thing, the fourth thing that Paul mentions here. Generous giving points people to God. Generous giving points people to God. That is all over this passage. Verse 11. You'll be enriched in every way to be generous in every way, which through us will produce what? Thanksgiving to God. Verse 12, for the ministry of this service isn't only supplying the needs of the saints, but also what? Overflowing with many thanksgivings to God. Verse 13, by their approval of this service, they will what? Glorify God. And then Paul brings it all together in verse 15, ties a wonderful bow on it by reminding us, thanks be to God for his inexpressible gift. So like I said just a moment ago, being generous does so much more than provide a physical blessing to meet a physical need. It preaches. It communicates. When we give generously, it doesn't just mean something to the people in the sense that it touches their hearts. It turns their hearts so that they can see the God that we see, and they can come to know the God that we know, and they can worship and glorify him just like we do too. So when it comes to generous giving, we don't need to think about the costs, because the truth is everybody wins. The people we're giving to are blessed. We are blessed in the process, and God is honored and glorified every step of the way. Now, I want to bring this series to a close with one final word of pastoral wisdom for us this morning. And it plays out in two ways, but here's the point I want us to keep in mind as we move forward today. There are no shortcuts in the generous life. Do we know this? There are no shortcuts in the generous life. And I mean that in two ways. Here's the first way. We never move beyond trusting God. We never move beyond it. We recognize on the front end, we give because what? He gave first. So we trust him to give. Well, we trust him to provide not just what we need, but what we need so that we can then go give, right? So we lean on God and we trust him to provide on the front end. But what did our focus today say? We keep trusting him every step of the way. So we trust him to provide so that we can be generous, and then we trust him to do what needs to be done through our generosity. Think about it. Even if we think we know what someone is going to, we don't. If we think we know what they truly need, we can see surface level needs, and it is good for us to try to meet those needs, but we don't ultimately know what they need most in their heart and their soul, but God does. So we trust him to provide so that we can give, but then we trust him with what we're giving, that it's going to do what needs to be done, not just on the surface level, but in someone's heart and in their mind and in their soul. Do we see that? So beginning to end, we trust God. We trust God to get us started. We trust God to keep us going. And we trust God to get us there, to do the work that needs to be done, to do what we can't do. And this isn't just a one-time thing, is it? It's not just a here or there kind of thing. Over and over and over, again and again and again, we trust him, we trust him, we trust him, right? Every step of the way. At no point does God pull back. At no point does God say, you know what, I think you guys have got a hand on it. You've kind of got it figured out. So you guys just take it from here and see how it goes. No, God says, I will continue to provide as you continue to trust me. There are no shortcuts. Secondly, generosity isn't based on a system. It's based on a someone. We could put a capital S with that, couldn't we? And I know this is cheesy, but I hope you see the point that I'm trying to make. Because we love our systems, don't we? We love to have things all kind of mapped out for us and outlined and figured out. We love to know what we're working with. We love to know what is expected of us, and we like numbers associated with it. We want to see it so we know how to navigate it. But really, at the core, what's that based on? It's based on our desire to be in control, for our desire to know what's going on and to be stable so that we can do what we want to do. See, systems take the guesswork out of things. Like we don't have to think about it, or we don't have to wrestle with it. Like think about tithing, for example. It's easy for us to say, hey, look, just tithe 10% off the top. Don't think about it, just do it and move on. And you can do that. That's fine. Some good things will happen, but that's not really the point, is it? What have we been saying all along? Generosity isn't about numbers or amounts. Generosity is not about how much you have or don't have, or how much you give or how much you don't give. What is God after? What does he want? It's not our stuff. What is it? It's us, our hearts. And not some of it, all of it. Not some of us, but all of us. So that's why Paul here never puts a number on it, right? That's why he never puts a percentage there for him. He never puts a system in place for their giving. He just points them to God and said, trust him and do what he says. That's my job as your pastor as well. It is not up to me to decide for you what generosity looks like in your life. It is not up to me to decide for you how much you should give. It is up to me to tell you God knows and God will provide, and you need to trust him and go be faithful. My job is to point you to him. See, the generous life is only possible and it's only meaningful in connection to God. That's where it comes from. It has to flow out of a living, trusting relationship with him. So we can have guidelines like a 10% kind of rule for tithing. That's helpful, but ultimately what is best is knowing and trusting and listening and walking with God. That's what we need. And there are no shortcuts to that. There are no shortcuts to that. It takes time. We got to put in the work to know him, to listen to his voice, and to follow his leading. And that brings me at long last to the table. I think this is the perfect way and the perfect place for us to end this series, isn't it? As we've talked so much about giving, I don't need to finish the series by encouraging you to give more. I want to finish the series by reminding us what God has already given us, right? Tell me if you know this verse. For God so loved the world that he what? He gave. And who did he give? His one and only son, so that whoever, no strings attached. If you want it and you need it, it's yours. That whoever believes in him, what? Will not perish, but will have everlasting life. That's what's in view here. That's our foundation. Again, we give from the overflow of what he has already given us, what he has already brought us into. And so we get started here.